And good morning, Quad Cities. A happy hump day to you. We have made it to Wednesday, and we're just about on the last Wednesday of October already. Second to last here. It is Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. Meteorologist Andrew Stutzke here, live with you this week. Doing the solo show today. We've got a couple of people on vacation, and we're helping out our sister station in Des Moines. So Peter or Morgan may be back with us next week. We'll see how the schedule shakes out here. We have, as always, a lot to discuss. We have gone from a really quiet weather pattern to a pretty active weather pattern, not just here at home, but across the country and also in the tropics. We have some new tropical activity to talk about. And as always, we're going to give you time to answer your questions and ask your questions as we near the bottom half of the half hour. So it's so good to be back with you again for another week of Ask Andrew Live. Welcome if this is your first time. We do this every Wednesday at 9 o'clock sharp right here on the A+ app. How do you get your question to me? Two ways. The preferred method is to go ahead and get on your cell phone and text it to me. That number is 309-304-0888. It is right here at the bottom of your screen. That way, it gets to the appropriate people that can forward it on to me. We're also simulcasting this on our Facebook page. You can type your question in there as well, but I always forewarn people, Facebook is a little wonky when it comes to the live comment section. Sometimes not all of them come through. So your best bet is to get it right down here, 309-304-0888. That will get it right out to me here. So how this works is, of course, I'm going to answer your questions coming up in a few minutes, but we'll do a weather discussion, see what's going on here in the next week's worth of weather. We certainly have a lot to talk about there. We'll talk about our two questions that I answered earlier this week. One of them had to deal with frost. We'll do a little deeper dive into that. And then we're going to get right to your questions. And already I see we have a question regarding the upcoming winter season. And yes, we have a lot to say about that. In fact, I have an update for you. Do you remember last year we did a winter weather special? We've got another one coming your way this year. And as of right now, it appears you're going to be able to watch it while you're gathered around the big Thanksgiving table with your turkey and everything else. Sounds like that's going to be airing on air anyway during the 4 o'clock show, The Current. So instead of The Current on Thanksgiving Day, we're going to have our weather special launch at 4 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day. So we're looking forward to that. Of course, if you can't tune in there, you can always stream it at any time right here on the A+ app. So we're looking forward to that. And of course, you'll get all of our thoughts about the winter. We'll have our snowfall estimates, what we think, how much snow we're going to have. We've got everybody on board working on this. Chief Meteorologist James Zahara, myself, Morgan, Peter. Allison is also going to be having a part in our winter weather special. In fact, she's here right now next door working on some of her story ideas for the winter weather special. So again, that'll be launching likely Thanksgiving Day, 4 o'clock instead of The Current, so you can tune in on the air then, or just check out the streaming app, watch it at your convenience. It's going to be about an hour long. We're going to have some really, really good content for you. Let's go ahead and review what's going on weather-wise. You know, the big story the last couple of days has been the wind. It has returned. You know, we've had a really, really nice break from the wind in the last several weeks because we haven't had any big-time storm systems moving through. The pattern's been stuck, and it's been stuck with good warm weather, right? Summer just kept lasting and didn't want to end. Well, that summer party came to an end yesterday as the front moved through. Strong area of low pressure. We're still tracking that over parts of Lake Michigan and also the Great Lakes region this morning. Actually, a good amount of rain moving into parts of Michigan, too. What we're going to be focused on this afternoon is not only this low pressure pulling away and getting a little bit lighter wind speeds, but we're also banking on some sunshine to finally make an appearance. And I'm going to show you the visible satellite. So this is the view from outer space if you were looking right down at the Earth. And what I want to show you is the dividing line between who's going to have clear skies today and who's likely going to be stuck in the clouds for a good chunk of the afternoon. So this is right now, and you can see there is a big dividing line here as we go from areas south of Monticello all the way down to the Quad Cities and right in here near Geneseo. So this is kind of the dividing line of clouds. So as I've said most of the morning, if you're southwest of the Quad Cities, you're going to get the most amount of sunshine today. If you're northeast, right in here, it's going to be a little bit later for that sunshine to make an appearance. Now, regardless, we're going to get a little bit warmer this afternoon. We'll still be limited to the 50s, but with those lighter wind gusts, it should be a little bit more tolerable to be outside, especially if you have the jacket on We had readings in the 30s and 40s this morning. Right now, we're pushing through the 40s, and eventually we're going to wind up in the 50s here. But those gusts are still there. We're still getting gusts that are times approaching 30 miles an hour. So you notice this morning we had to deal with this here. A feels like factor, that wind chill factor came back. That definitely made for a cooler start this morning. There you see some 30s are still hanging on to the west and south of us. Here's your wind speeds and the wind gusts. So those 40+ mile an hour wind gusts, they are moving east. They are moving out of our region. But notice we still have a lot of that darker yellow, that darker orange, where we have 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts that are still being found across the region. Future Track is right on the money with this forecast today. I'm really impressed with how it's handling this, because look at the cloud cover here. By later this morning, that back edge is slowly starting to work its way to the northeast. So if you're south, you're going to get a lot of sun. If you're north, it's going to take some time to get these clouds out of here. And it looks like most of us will be cloud free tonight. Now, that's going to be a problem, because look at your wind speeds tonight. We're talking about single-digit wind speeds, very little in the way of cloud cover, and still this northwest flow across the region. That's going to be a problem if you are a green thumber. We actually have a weather impact day in place for tomorrow morning, also in for Friday morning. This is going to be because of the frost potential. So both tomorrow and Friday will feature that. Temperatures dropping to near freezing, if not just above. In fact, I think Friday morning we have the potential to drop below freezing for a few hours, especially if you're north of the Quad Cities. So widespread frost is expected. Green thumbers, you know what to do with this. You're going to have to bring plants inside, or you're going to have to cover them up. There's a third option I'm going to talk about here in just a second, which I kind of like a little bit better. I think it's a little more efficient and a better use of your time. So just protecting the plants. Also, I think tomorrow morning and Friday morning, you should give yourself an additional 1 or 2 minutes if your vehicle is left outside, because you're going to have to do a little bit of window scraping. Not all of us have the luxury of remote start, am I right? So if you don't have remote start, yep, you're going to have to be doing that window scraping and all that good stuff. A reminder, too, as the weather gets colder, and all of our area police departments are going to really be reminding us in the next several months, you don't leave your car running with the keys in it. I know it's tempting to do, even in a small town. You never know who is around you, who's in your surroundings that has a little bit of a nefarious goal or intent. So let's not do that. Let's not get a busy start to the season when it comes to car thefts around here. That has been an issue we've talked about breathlessly the last few years. So again, don't do that the next couple of mornings. I know it's going to be tempting, but just resist that temptation to leave your keys in your car while it is running, even if it's in your garage, even if it's in your driveway. You don't know someone's intent, and some folks will do anything to get a vehicle. So keep that in mind there. Just wanted to put that PSA out there. Let's talk about the frost advisory. This is going to be coming in, especially as we go into tonight. We're likely going to see another one issued for tomorrow with the temperature pattern that I'm seeing. So everyone has the frost advisory tonight. Doesn't matter if you're north, south, east, west, everybody's got it. You look at Chicago, and it's like, well, why isn't Chicago included in the frost advisory? Urban heat island effect. They actually stay a little bit warmer thanks to that urban heat island, all that pavement that they've got maintaining some of the warmth. Let's go to our frost and freeze tracker. Love this tool because it pinpoints exactly which areas we think are going to be more at risk of getting the frost and freeze conditions. So frost possible is in that darker teal. The frost likely is in the really bright screaming teal, as I like to call it. And then the freeze possible is going to be in your blue. So notice our northern hometowns and even some of these river valleys, like right here into the Quad Cities, we're seeing that frost potential. So if you're a hometown that typically on the temperature map in the morning, when you're watching us, is usually cooler than the surrounding hometowns, you've got a better chance of seeing that frost tonight. But watch what the difference looks like between tonight and as we go into Friday. Friday morning, I think we have a better potential at more widespread sub-32-degree lows, especially in our northern hometowns here, where you're seeing that darker blue. That's where you're going to see the freeze conditions potentially develop as we go into Friday morning. So here's what you can do to plan and prepare for these types of conditions. Of course, we know we can go out and we can cover up the plants. Make sure you're using fabric. You don't want to cover these up with plastic. It's a living thing and it needs to breathe. We don't like being covered up in plastic, at least I don't. So yeah, don't use the plastic, use the fabric. You can bring it inside as well. But what I like to do is option number 3 right here, because did you know, and you can even ask Craig at GMQC at 11, he'll tell you the same thing. You can take your garden hose before you go to bed, go outside, give that whole area of plants you want to protect a good soaking. That water will actually maintain heat and hold heat overnight and keep that plant and its surrounding area a little bit warmer. Some crazy physics behind that, but it works. And again, we're going to talk more with Craig Ignite coming up later this morning on GMQC at 11. So make sure and bring your questions, your plant and garden questions. I have a feeling a lot of you are going to be asking about what's going to happen and who's going to be vulnerable to this frost and to this freeze. So what does the 8-day have in store for us? What are we expecting in terms of this weather getting into the weekend? Because it's a big weekend for us here at WQAD. We have Boo at the Zoo this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. Marcus and I will be there from 11 to 1 on Saturday, and we look forward to being with all of you, and I can't wait to show off our costumes either. They're going to be pretty cool. But it looks good. A light jacket perhaps, but we will have some sunshine to help warm me up Saturday and Sunday. Our next chance for showers coming in early next week. Before we get to our Ask Andrew questions that we did this week, I do want to give you an update on the tropics, because we've had a brand new tropical storm develop yesterday, and this thing has the potential to get extremely strong, and if it does, it has the potential to kind of mess up the timing of these showers and the strength and coverage of these showers coming in as we go into early next week. So let's talk about that. This is Tropical Storm Melissa that has formed in the Caribbean, and this thing from the get-go has been very strong in terms of its ability to intensify over a short period of time. In fact, if you look at the wind speeds right now, we're at 50 miles an hour. It's not going to take much more intensity of an increase anyway to get this thing to go to a hurricane. And I will tell you what, the waters here in the Caribbean are raging hot. There is a lot of heat energy this thing can use. There's not a lot of wind shear to kind of break it apart. It's an interesting storm though, because if you look at the track of this thing, it gets kind of messy. It's not moving really quickly. In fact, it kind of just stalls out here in the Caribbean as we go through the upcoming weekend. But you do notice here, we're eventually going to get this up to a Category 2. And personally, I think this is going to be stronger than that heading into the weekend. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be looking at least a Category 3 storm by the end of this weekend. Possibly even stronger, given the warmth, the water content warmth that we have down here in the Caribbean. But notice this cone. Usually our cone is nice and straight and narrow. This cone is like a complete circle, which is something you don't see a whole lot of. Why is that? Well, again, it's slow movement. Okay, it's not moving very quickly. So that makes the cone of uncertainty this giant circle as it kind of meanders here in the Caribbean. But there's two possible solutions that may come from this. We have some computer models taking it this way to the northeast, taking it back out into the Gulf as a little cold front comes back in, or taking it back out into the Atlantic, And then we have another couple of model solutions that take it to the northwest and do take it into the Gulf next week, which would be trouble for the Gulf Coast states. And it would also be trouble for our weather pattern because that would have an impact here. So we're going to be watching that heading into the weekend. Our fingers are crossed, and most of the model data agrees that this thing is going to be dragged northeast with a cold front. It's likely going to go into parts of the DR and also Haiti. But in terms of U.S. impact right now, it appears it's a low threat. It looks like it's going to get carried back out to sea. Nonetheless, again, it is worth watching, especially if this storm can become a major hurricane and strengthen quickly. Those storm systems can have a mind of their own and go wherever they want, regardless of whatever pattern you may have in play. Going to get interesting, that is for sure. We'll see what that looks like. Lastly, Halloween. What's Halloween looking like? Let's pull up the 14-day because Halloween is now in our sights, as well as the end of daylight saving time. Don't forget, that's coming up here in a week from Sunday. So Halloween right now, we're trending dry with temperatures in the 50s, but it looks like trick-or-treating, especially after dark, will be in the upper 40s. So you will want a warmer costume this year. Not looking at any rain or snow, at least as of right now. That's looking really, really good. Let's go to our Ask Andrew questions, and then we'll go to your questions. These are the two questions I handpicked this week. Some of these even come from our show right here, so we can do a deeper dive into them. The one I chose this morning to cover, and then I'll show you the one earlier in the week. This was about frost. And this is a great question, great timing for this time of year, asking, does frost only depend on the temperature to form? And Marianne from Galesburg had asked that. So let's dive in, and I'll explain how frost forms here. So it is not just temperature, surprisingly. This is how frost works. So we measure temperature at about our height here. It's about 5 to 10 feet off the ground. Why do we do that? Well, most of our sensory as human beings is above our waist. You know, when you get cold, what are you shivering? What part of your body usually feels the coldest? It's right up in here, right? That's where we measure our temperature. It doesn't make sense to have a thermometer 20 or 50 feet in the air where we don't live. This is our living space, if you will. So we always measure at about 5 to 10 feet off the ground. However, if you have joined Morgan and I for Storm Trek 8 University way back in the day, you know that cold air has a certain property that can make that temperature 5 to 10 feet off the ground feel even colder at the ground level. And that's what we're talking about here with frost. That cold air is dense. It's a lot more dense than warm and even humid air. And the fact that it's denser means it's heavier and it sinks toward the ground. So what happens is you could have an air temperature measured with our thermometer of 35 degrees, but you go to the ground level and you could have a temperature below freezing. And that's what I'm showing you here in this case. So because of that difference in temperature and also a difference in moisture content as well, you get this frost that forms at the ground. So it's not always about the temperature when it comes to the frost threat. You could look at your Storm Track 8 app and say, well, tonight's low is going to be 35. I'm not going to have to worry about frost. Look at that. That's not the case because the low temperature at the ground, the coldest part of the night, could actually go below freezing, forming that frost. So that's something a lot of people don't know about. Also check this out too. This is our first frost history for the last several years. Don't have 2024 on here yet. I'll have to add that a little bit later. But I want to show you just kind of how neatly clustered a lot of our frosts have been. We have seen a lot of them right around this time. So for once, I can say Mother Nature is actually on schedule in the Quad Cities. I can't say that a lot around here. We have a lot of wonky things that happen. But you can see a lot of this is scheduled or centered around October 15th to the 20th. We're going to be going into the 23rd, 24th in the next couple of days, so that is expected. It is expected that we have our frost this time of year. The latest one I can see here is 2016, where we had to wait until the second week of November to get our first frost. That was a warm fall season. That's not going to be the case this year at all. All right, lastly, what I want to talk about is the question that we had on Monday, and that was daylight saving time. That's always a popular topic to talk about because there's two camps of people when it comes to daylight saving time. There's ones that want to keep it and keep going on and off of it, and then there's others that want to get rid of it completely. So I'm going to search for my graphic here really quickly because I'm going to show you the two examples of what could happen depending on what your preference is here. So we'll start with example number one. So this is for the folks that want to get rid of daylight saving time permanently. You'd never want to go back on it again. So we follow that in the winter. Obviously, there's no change. But the big change that you notice is in the summer, for a few weeks anyway, especially in I believe it would be June, this is your sunrise. It's at 4:15 in the morning. Now, myself, Ava, and Devin, and all the folks on the morning show, we would be thrilled with this. That makes it a lot easier to wake up in the morning. But those of you that have kids, or maybe you're not a farmer and you like to sleep a little bit later, that would be a really, really early sunrise for you. Not to mention, you know, if you're a fan of those really nice long summer evenings, your sunset's going to be a bit earlier at 7:30. So you don't get that nice long evening daylight. So that's a change there. One of the other options is to get on daylight saving time and just make it be year-round. Here's what happens with that. Of course, we do that now for the summer months, so there'd be no change there. So we're talking about a change in the winter. And this is a change that not a lot of folks are happy with, especially those of you that have kids that have to walk to school. And really, any of us that, you know, need caffeine to get going too. Look at your sunrise in the winter. It would be, for a few weeks anyway, as late as 8:30 in the morning. That's a lot of kids going to school in the dark. That's a lot of you going to school in the dark. And you get a little bit more daylight here at the end, though. Your sunset at the peak of winter in January would be delayed until 5:30. But you're really going to have a consequence early on, though, after this time change of those much later sunrises. And I don't know about you, but I think an 8:30 a.m. sunrise, ooh, that would really make it hard to wake up. I think a lot of us would be really, really tired. So do we stay on it? Do we get rid of it completely? Do we just keep doing this round and roundabout thing until the end of time? That remains to be seen. A reminder, it takes an act of Congress to do that, to change this. And last we checked, and pardon the old graphics here, the last time they tried to do anything with this, that is our government elected officials, it passed the Senate with unanimous consent. It had no problem there, but it got to the House, it stalled in committee, and then the bill died, and nothing has happened with it since. Every year, though, and I guarantee you're going to hear this in the next couple of weeks, a politician will bring it back up. They'll try to pass it again, or they'll try to do some version of it, and likely it will die in the House. So that's where things stand. Again, it takes an act of Congress to move that needle there. Let's see what we've got for some questions here, and we'll dig right into those. Again, I want to thank you guys for joining me again this week. Finally, some exciting weather to talk about, right? It's not just sunshine and 80s. I've been waiting for some more exciting weather, and we finally got it. All right, let's dig right in here. I see some familiar names, so I want to welcome everybody in this morning. Let's start with Juanita and asking, what's the winter weather going to be like here in Prophetstown this year? Let me guess, cold and very snowy. You are right on the money. Again, we're going to have our winter weather special coming out Thanksgiving Day. It'll be launched at 4 o'clock on the air and then, of course, on the streaming app. But all things so far are pointing to that colder and snowier than normal winter. Now, you're going to see some scenarios, and this is going to be included in our winter weather special, where we do have some winters that maybe don't include that kind of scenario that are coming in. But still, I think it's worth talking about that the La Nina is going to have some sort of an impact here. I'm going to look at one of my graphics here and see if this is actually up to date here, talking about La Nina. And I'll give it a pause here. So when we talk about La Nina, what is that? Well, we're talking about these cooler than normal waters. In fact, this La Nina that's ongoing right now is actually a little bit stronger than the last one we had not that long ago. So that's why we're thinking this is going to have more of an influence. But when you talk about that cooler than normal water, even hundreds and hundreds of miles to the south of us, it has an impact on our jet stream. And you can see that impact making the jet stream go a little bit further to the north. In fact, that jet stream is right over top of us for most of the winter season. What does that mean? It means multiple storm systems. The only thing is, can you get the cold air to work with those storm systems to get a lot of snow? Past history has told us that, yes, we've been able to do that. More than half of our La Nina winters have had more snow, have been colder than normal, and have also had more rain compared to normal as well. So it's something we're going to continue to monitor. Again, the strength of the La Nina will be key. We've also been monitoring some warmer than normal waters off the Pacific Northwest, which would normally displace the really cold air from Alaska, carry it down this jet stream and send it right in our direction. Those warmer waters, though, have actually been weakening the last couple of weeks. So if we don't see a resurgence of that, I think our winter forecast is a little bit more up in the air. But if we do see a resurgence of those warm waters here off the Pacific coast, that could really mean we're in for a very cold spell for the upcoming winter. So again, our winter weather special coming up Thanksgiving Day. That'll be at 4 o'clock. We'll have all of our thoughts there, our snowfall estimations, and you can also stream it here on the A+ app as well. I'm curious about the winter every day. Don't you worry. It's always in my mind. Good morning to Billy from Clinton. It's good to have you back with us again this morning. With last week's discussion being about nor'easters, it got my mind thinking about them, and I have 2 questions about nor'easters. My first question is, can a nor'easter produce a derecho? My second question is, do you think National Weather Service officers will start naming them while also giving them a category similar to hurricanes? Thank you for your time, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. So yes, that's a great question, Billy. And to review, if you weren't familiar with what we talked about yesterday, if you missed it, let me see if I can pull up my little explanation here as to what nor'easters are. So nor'easters, it's a fancy name for a very strong area of low pressure that goes up the East Coast. And this is what it looks like on satellite. It almost looks like a hurricane, the only exception being you have this really, really big dry slot of air out ahead of it. So with a nor'easter, it can get very strong. You can get very strong winds, 80, 90 miles per hour. The only difference is with a nor'easter, this is an actual area of low pressure. It has no tropical characteristics whatsoever. With a normal area of low pressure, it has what we call a cold core of air associated with it. A tropical system has a warm core associated with it. It doesn't involve cold air. It still gets strong, but it's a totally different process. So I do not expect the National Weather Service will ever name nor'easters. I also really don't see much of a derecho potential with nor'easters either, because most of the thunderstorm activity associated with nor'easters is kept offshore. It really doesn't have much of a chance to get onshore to produce much thunderstorm activity. So great question. Yeah, derecho's not really common with this. The thunderstorms are offshore in the ocean. And no, I do not see the National Weather Service naming them. The Weather Channel does that sometimes, but we do not, and the government does not either. Great question, Billy. Jessica was asking about Halloween. Again, if you missed the 14-day, we think Halloween's going to be a little cooler than we would typically expect. I think trick-or-treating, we're looking at low 50s, some upper 40s coming in, and right now the forecast is holding dry for late next week. Not seeing any rain chances coming in then. We have Chris and Kayla watching from Walnut. Can you help explain what the ring is around the moon in these colder days? So yes, I can definitely explain what the ring around the moon is. It is, kind of think of it as like a sundog, but we call it a moon dog. I might have a graphic in here. I'm going to search for this really quick and see if I have, because I know I've talked about this before with this little ring around the moon. Whether I have a graphic saved for it, that's another question. If I don't, that's okay, and I can explain it verbatim. That's not going to be a problem. I don't see anything there. It's kind of like a sundog. Okay, so yeah, I don't have anything, unfortunately, and that's okay. No problem. So the ring around the moon, especially on the colder days, and this is especially true in the winter, the ring around the moon is caused by water droplets, frozen water droplets that are suspended in the atmosphere. The colder the temperature, the more of these little ice crystals you're going to have. And that is the reason you're seeing that ring around the moon, is all that moonlight reflects off those ice crystals. And like we see a sundog, especially in the wintertime, that's when you see that ring, that rainbow ring around the sun, and it especially gets emphasized on the two sides. This is essentially the same process, except you're talking about the moon. It's all about the moonlight reflecting off of those water crystals that surround the moon in the upper levels of the atmosphere. I wish I had a graphic on that. I thought I did it one time, but I'm not seeing it in my library unless I called it something else. Great question, though, Chris and Kayla. Thank you. Tyler, what does this upcoming winter look like, and when do we typically see our first freeze of the fall? I went over the first freeze a couple of weeks ago, actually. We talked about that, and I had a nice graph that had all of the previous frost freeze dates, and we typically see the last or the first freeze at the end of the month. That's the average. So we're going to be coming up on that. We still think the freeze will likely happen later this week. It's going to be Friday morning that we're likely looking at the first freeze of the season. I don't think I'm going to be able to pull it up quickly here. Or actually, there it is, right here. So this is the graphic I was talking about, the first frost and freeze dates. So this is all of them since the 1930s. So you can see the average here is right between the 5th of October and about the first week of November. So we're falling in line pretty good. If we have our first freeze this year right here, we'd say that's pretty average. The latest we've ever had has been well into November. So I would guarantee here, especially based on historical averages, we're going to see that first freeze either this week or next week. If we don't see it this Friday, as you saw on the 14-day, we have 50s in the forecast next week, or for week number 2. We'll definitely likely see it next week, if not the week after, based on not just the average, but based on the weather data that I showed you with the 14-day outlook as well. Let's see. We have Deb from Monmouth wondering, why is it always so wet outside on mornings when temperatures are in the upper 60s and lower 70s and the dew points are really low? Thank you, and keep up the great work. Well, thank you, Deb, for that question. So that has to do with that difference in moisture content. So when you have a discrepancy like that between the temperature and the dew point, relative humidity also plays a role in this as well. You get that morning dew that forms on the ground. You could even be in the midst of a drought, for example. There couldn't be hardly any moisture in the ground whatsoever, and we've seen that early in the fall and also late in the summer. we still got dew to form on the ground. Why is that happening? Well, it all has to do with that discrepancy between the dew point and the temperature. That can tend to squeeze out and actually form a little bit of that moisture onto surfaces like our yards and the tops of our cars. So that has to do with those two things that we measure. Even the air could be dry, you're still going to get enough humidity with that difference in the temperature and dew point to cause that dew to form. So that's a really good question there. Let's see who else we have this morning. Oh, we got a lottery agent in the chat this morning. You could ignore that. That's a bot. Nobody has won the lottery in here. We do not do that on this stream. Riley is asking, why do hurricanes always know where they're going? This is our joke of the day. Why do hurricanes always know where they're going? She says the answer is they have a great eyesight. They have great eyesight. That's always good. Thanks, Riley, for coming into the chat this morning. With that, we're all caught up. Again, ignore the bot in the chat. Nobody's won the lottery. I have no money to give away. I'd be the last person you'd want to come to for money, trust me. That'll wrap us up here for Ask Andrew Live. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode this week. A reminder, we do this every single Wednesday. Even the days I'm on vacation, Morgan and Peter and some other folks stand in for me, which I greatly appreciate. But you can always rewatch this episode and take a look back at other episodes right here on our A+ app. So I will see you guys coming up on GMQC at 11. And if I don't see you then, hopefully we'll see you next week on Ask Andrew Live here on the A+ app. Have a great day, Quad Cities.